I'm 101 years old. I've lived long enough to watch everything I once believed in crumble right before my eyes. I've outlived the people I admired, the ones I envied, the ones I looked down on. I've outlived those who hurt me. And worst of all, I've outlived the foolish, arrogant, know-it-all version of myself. At this age, I'm no longer standing on the road of life. I'm standing at the edge of the cliff. I can see the bottom. I can feel the cold of it waiting. And before I leave the party where you're all still drunkenly dancing behind me, I have to turn back. I have to tell you what no one at the bar, no one on the internet, no one in your life will ever say straight to your face. You're living wrong. You're walking around with blind confidence that life will always give you more chances, that you can skip, ignore, look away, not listen, not care, and still be fine. You treat every day like it's cheap merchandise, as if you have an infinite warehouse of unused sunrises. Let me be blunt. You don't. No one does. You don't feel the weight of that truth. Because if you did, you wouldn't live so carelessly. I know, because I was exactly like you, blind while thinking I could see. And to understand what destroyed me most slowly, but most cruelly, let me tell you about a man named Samuel. It was June 1943, when I had just turned 20, the age when you think you're invincible, that the world revolves around your young, reckless footsteps. Dustin, the town where I grew up, was sweltering then. The fine dirt roads, the leaning fences, the weathered porches, everything so familiar I never really looked. People were the same. I didn't truly see anyone, and among those people I treated like background scenery. There was one named Samuel. Samuel lived 3 houses down from mine, a thin old man, slightly hunched, wearing a coat so old its color had become something nameless. He walked very slowly, spoke very little, and his eyes always seemed to be looking at a place no one in town could see. People called him odd. Kids mocked him, and me. I didn't bother to care. To me, he was just a harmless shadow, slipping through the lazy afternoons of youth, until one Sunday afternoon, the day that carved a scratch into my life. I've carried for the next 80 years. As I passed his house, I saw Samuel sitting on a broken chair on the porch. The chair looked like one strong breath would snap it in half. Yet he sat upright, hands on his knees, eyes fixed on me, as if waiting. Those cloudy eyes were strangely sharp, a cold sharpness of someone who'd watched too many lives fall away. He called me, not loud, but enough to cut through the arrogant carelessness 20-year-olds wear like armor. I walked over, reluctantly. Samuel said he had something he wanted to give me. The way he said it made me think he was about to hand me some old trinket, a lucky coin, a notebook, something meaningless. But he didn't hand me anything. He talked about a story, a very private part of his life, something he'd clearly kept silent for too long. Something that day was rising in his throat, demanding to come out before it was too late. But me, I wasn't there. My body stood on his porch, but my mind was elsewhere. The road behind, the coming evening, the empty plans of a kid who thought he was immortal. I half listened. I nodded to get it over with. I looked at the lamppost, at the kids running down the street, at anything except the face of the man trying to give me one last thing. Samuel knew. I saw the moment of realization flash across his face. It wasn't disappointment. It wasn't anger. It was understanding. A cold understanding that made my skin crawl. I didn't see him. I wasn't present. And what he wanted to give, I never opened myself to receive. I walked away while he was still speaking. I didn't look back. I didn't know that would be the last time I'd see him alive. 3 weeks later, Samuel died. A neighbor told me that on his final day, Samuel said, "I wish that kid had listened to me." His final lesson vanished with his last breath, and me, the one given the chance to understand another human being, threw it away without a glance. People don't need you to change their lives. They just need you to see them. But I was blind while my eyes were still perfectly intact. And I paid for that blindness my whole life. It took me more than 80 years to say this without shame. The biggest mistake of my life wasn't a wrong decision, wasn't a foolish action. It was that I didn't know how to see people, not because I was cold, but because I never learned to be truly present with anyone who crossed my path. I didn't listen. I didn't read the small cracks, the faint signals, the seemingly harmless words hiding entire mountains, weighing on the other person's shoulders. I didn't see the sadness behind the smile. I passed through other people's lives like a ghost. I stood there, but I wasn't there. I heard them speak, but I didn't understand what they said. I looked at them, but I didn't see them. I was so busy being the main character in my own story that everyone else was just blurry background. And then one day I woke up when it was too late and realized I'd gone through an entire life without truly touching anyone else's. The most painful truth I learned: most people don't need you to solve their problems. They just need to be seen, to be noticed by someone, to be acknowledged that they exist. But for decades I couldn't do that. One seemingly simple thing: when you don't see anyone, you don't keep anyone in memory either. All that's left are flickering shadows. I recall hundreds of moments I once thought weren't worth noticing. Now they haunt me like unanswered questions. I remember the lady at the general store, the one who always smiled, always said, "Have a good day, kid." But her hands trembled every time she counted change. I saw that trembling hundreds of times, but I never once wondered why. I never asked a single question. "Are you okay?" I remember Miller, my coworker at the workshop, a big man like an oak tree, but he'd go quiet mid-sentence, eyes on the ground, hands gripping his hat brim like he was holding himself together. I always clicked my tongue thinking he was bad at communicating, but it wasn't clumsiness, it was pain. Pain so obvious that now, remembering, I wonder how could I not see. And then there was the neighbor boy, a skinny kid, who used to run after me just to show me little things he found. One day he gave me an old pocket knife, eyes shining like he'd discovered treasure. I just mumbled something and walked away. A few months later I learned it was the only thing he had left from his father. I didn't see that tiny pride, didn't see that fragile hope, didn't see a child's heart reaching out right in front of me. All those moments, the trembling store lady, Miller going silent, the neighbor boy waiting for praise, were silent cries for help. Fragile signals that if I'd looked just a little closer, been present just a little more, I would have understood. But I was blind. Not blind in the eyes, blind in the heart. I realized the tragedy wasn't that I couldn't help them. The tragedy was that I never saw them enough to help. I let them fall into the invisibility I myself created. And that the invisibility we unintentionally cast on others is the most enduring wound. You can apologize to someone for a wrong action, but how do you apologize for never having seen them? The biggest mistake of my life wasn't what I did. It was my failure to be present in other people's lives. I've carried that mistake all the way to 101, and it's so heavy that sometimes I feel it's the very thing keeping me from closing my eyes for the last time. Being 101 is a very strange land. It's unlike any road you've ever walked. Here, there's no more reputation. No one cares if you won or lost, if you were good or bad. Here only one thing remains: memory. And memory, at this age, is like faded film reels. They flicker, stutter, miss pieces, sometimes just shadows without outlines. I sit in this room, the room you could call the end of the map, and look back at my life. And what chills me to the bone isn't age, What terrifies me is this. The faces that once passed through my life are now just faint streaks of light, because I never truly let them into my heart. The people who showed me kindness, who helped me when I needed it, who were present in moments I thought ordinary, now exist in my mind, only as shapeless dots, not because they faded with time, but because I didn't look at them clearly enough when they stood right in front of me. I remember Samuel, the way he sat on that broken chair, cloudy eyes deep as a well. I remember Miller, his hands clutching the hat brim, the silence mid-sentence I never questioned. I remember the woman at the store, her wide smile and trembling hands. But what I remember isn't their real selves. I only remember the blurred versions I allowed myself to see. I sit here and realize I never truly knew who Samuel was. I never understood what was breaking Miller from the inside. I never asked what the woman was fighting against. I thought they were just passers-by, shadows in the background of my own picture. But now, at the end, those very people stand out clear, as not clear in detail, but clear in their absence, clear in the emptiness of realizing I have nothing left of them except a few incomplete memory fragments. The brutal truth age 101 has given me is this: if you don't look at a person while they're standing in front of you, the memory of them will never take clear shape in your mind. It will always remain a shadow, not because your memory fails, but because you never looked deeply enough from the start. That's life's quietest punishment. What you don't cherish while you have it fades into the fog of years, and you'll never retrieve any detail, no matter how much you beg your memory. The most frightening thing isn't death. People always think death is the terrifying final chapter. But no, the most frightening thing is living a life blurred with the very people who touched you, passing them without touching them, and then growing old with an empty reel of life, where everyone is just blurry figures. No voices, no shades, no stories, just traces of people you could have known, could have understood, could have been present with, even just for a moment. Now I understand in life, nothing hurts more than realizing you didn't keep anyone, not because they left, but because you never truly saw them from the beginning. I'm telling you this not to scare you or be pessimistic. I'm telling you because I'm living proof of a truth you don't want to experience yourself. If you treat others as background, you'll grow old with an empty reel of life. And when you realize it, you won't be able to go back and look at them again. You don't need to live another 80 years to understand what I'm saying. You just need to open your eyes today. It took me nearly a century to realize what I should have understood the day Samuel called me over on that broken chair. And that makes me furious with myself, because this lesson isn't complicated. It isn't lofty philosophy. It just requires a heart willing to look straight at the person in front of them. Attention is the highest form of kindness. Not money, not promises, not grand gestures. Attention, pure, full, undistracted, is the gift people give each other too rarely and too late. When you truly look at someone, you're giving them the feeling of existing, of being recognized, of being seen. And sometimes that's enough to pull a person back from the edge you didn't even know they were standing on. So let me say it clearly, specifically, no beating around the bush. When someone talks to you, look them in the eyes. Just 5 seconds is enough for them to feel you're there with them. When you sense something's off with someone, don't pretend not to notice like I did my whole life. Don't ignore it. Don't tell yourself they're probably fine. Open your mouth and ask, "Are you okay?" 4 syllables. But sometimes it's the only thread still holding them. When you're in front of another human being, be there with your whole mind. Don't let your thoughts run elsewhere. Don't let imaginary busyness pull you out of the moment, right in front of you. Presence is the sign of humanity. Practice seeing the people you meet every day. The cashier at the supermarket, the old man sweeping the yard, the coworker passing you in the hallway. They're all carrying stories you don't know. pains you don't see, joys you've never heard, and maybe just one kind look from you is enough to make them feel lighter. I'm 101 years old, and this is the one thing I'm certain of. You will never regret looking at someone closely, but you will hurt your whole life for missing a person who was standing right in front of you. I'm living proof of that, and I don't want you to carry the kind of regret I've carried my entire life. So I'll say this last thing clearly. Live now. Notice people now. Don't take a lifetime to understand what I finally learned. Live right now by truly seeing the people in your life. That's the only way, so that when you reach the end, you don't have to whisper the question I've asked myself for half a century. Why didn't I see them sooner? If what I've shared touches you, please hit subscribe so we can continue these honest conversations about life together. See you in the next video, where we look even deeper together into the things that seem small, but determine an entire lifetime.